Prime Minister Starmer because he was a winner. He had this huge, and still has this huge majority in Parliament. He has to project that sense of remaining a winner despite his domestic challenges.
Maggie, what stands out to you so far about today's state visit, and what else is on the agenda for today?
Well, I think something we've been talking about all day long here is just the extraness that is happening. You know, every single detail has been so coordinated, and they made it quite over the top to show what a big moment this is. The second state visit for a sitting U.S. president, that in of itself is unprecedented. That carriage ride, the first time that's ever happened for a U.S. president through the grounds of Windsor. Everything has been thought through, it sends a message, the details are incredibly important, and to watch that unfold has been quite incredible. And then the rest of the day, we're going to see this continue. I mean, this has all kind of been the lead back to tonight, the big show, the state dinner. And I just want to sort of set the scene for you guys, Diane, of what's going to happen tonight. I mean, we think we've seen pomp and circumstance. Just imagine this state dinner. It takes around 5 days to lay the table in St. George's Hall. And they kind of have this fabulous process where they bring in a ruler and measure the distance between each chair, the distance between each plate. The seating arrangements are meticulously planned out. There's about 1,000 glasses on the table, all washed by hand. I mean, the process of this is incredible to think through. And when you focus on the fact that this is all soft power, the idea behind this dinner is, yes, it's a dinner party between two world leaders and soft diplomacy, but it's setting the stage for tomorrow's real policy that will occur. The dinner is incredibly important to me, Diane.
All right, Maggie, Willie, Steve Hill, thank you both. And prosecutors now say the suspect in Charlie Kirk's murder left a note saying he planned to kill Kirk. Missy also later confessed in text to his romantic murder. Now the 22-year-old will face a possible death sentence if convicted after appearing in court for the first time. ABC investigative reporter Olivia Rubin's here with more on that. Olivia, what's the latest on this new evidence? So Catherine, Trump himself has pressured the Department of Justice to investigate James more aggressively. Two officials have pushed federal prosecutors to seek an indictment against her. So what evidence are they looking to?
Well, federal prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia have investigated this. They've interviewed, according to our sources, more than a dozen people who are grand jury and cases spoken to investigators and federal prosecutors. And the reality is that so far this investigation has turned up no evidence of criminal wrongdoing. That James knowingly, for example, lied on these forms when she declared something as her primary residence. Now, what's interesting here is they're obviously, the investigators are trying to say that she made statements to a financial institution to secure favorable terms on a mortgage for her Virginia home, but there was only one document, we're told by sources, in her entire loan file that essentially has that box check marks, that box that says it would be her primary residence. And at least from what investigators have learned from talking to witnesses is that that document was just used as a template, that nobody really checked it, that James behind the scenes to the loan officers and other people was actually saying that she had no intention of living there. So what prosecutors are struggling with is charging a crime, that they are coming up with evidence that does not prove that she knowingly misrepresented on this one form where her other forms didn't misrepresent. But the whole point here is that Donald Trump and the White House, and of course these two officials, Ed Martin, the head of DOJ's Weaponization Working Group, and Bill Pulte, he's the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, who originally made that criminal referral, they're not really taking that as an answer. They want prosecutors there to bring charges, so much so that Bill Pulte has urged President Trump to fire the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia who is overseeing this. So it's a pretty messy situation, Diane, behind the scenes, and it's clearly exposing cracks within the Department of Justice top leadership.
And what are James and the White House saying about this?
So, in terms of this reporting, the White House is declining to comment. James's lawyer is saying that there's no question that they couldn't find any evidence so far because, of course, as you mentioned there at the top, they're denying any allegations here of criminal wrongdoing. So I'm sure it won't be the last we have heard about this, but all we do know is that the White House is very much, including President Trump, pushing for these indictments that federal prosecutors cannot bring because they have so far found no evidence.
All right, ABC News Washington Bureau Managing Editor Catherine Faulders, thank you. Israel says it's attacking a Hamas stronghold as part of its new offensive in Gaza City. The IDF says it struck 150 terrorist targets in the last 48 hours. Now Israeli officials say more than 400,000 people have fled the heart of the city. ABC News foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burridge is in Israel with more. Tom, what's the latest on this offensive in Gaza?
Yeah, we know the IDF, Diane, is now operating right in the heart of Gaza City. We've seen video from the IDF of tanks and armored vehicles maneuvering in that area. We have, over the last 48 hours, seen pretty intense bombardment of that area up in the north of the Strip. And we're seeing in the intensification of evacuation. So yes, the IDF, as you say, is saying 400,000 people have now left Gaza City, but even if that figure is accurate, it would still leave about 600,000 Palestinians, roughly, according to UN figures, in that city. So there's still a massive, massive challenge to try and move people away from harm's way. The IDF has opened up another route, it says, for those evacuations to take place. But of course, aid agencies say there is no real safe place in Gaza. And of course, you and I have spoken about this many, many times. People have been moved time and time and time again throughout this war. This is a new offensive. The IDF is saying this won't take days or weeks. It will take potentially months. And it is complicated urban combat, basically, against what remains of Hamas. But there's deep opposition here in Israel and a lot of opposition around the world. But the Trump administration is broadly behind this offensive. Diane?
And earlier today, you spoke to the mother of a hostage about her concerns surrounding this new ground offensive. What did she tell you?
Yeah, I spoke to Idit Ochel. She is the mother of Alon Ochel, 24. He was 22 when he was taken by Hamas for the Nova Music Festival. His family believe he has lost the sight in one eye due to injuries he sustained during his capture and during his captivity. She is racked with fear, as you can imagine, a mother whose son is in Gaza right now. I mean, obviously she doesn't know for sure where her son is, but she says there is a probability, a possibility that he could be in Gaza City. She didn't even want to reply to questions like, does she fear that Hamas could use her son as a human shield in this offensive? But look, she is really, appealing to President Trump, appealing to the Israeli government for an end to the war, for some kind of deal. And I also asked her about the Israeli government's tactics in this offensive and trying to get some of the hostages free. Take a listen.
Prime Minister Netanyahu says that Hamas has to be eliminated, and he says military pressure will free the hostages. Do you accept that idea?
I don't know. I'm not, I'm just Alon's mother. I'm not in the table to know all the details, to know if this is true or not. I'm not a military strategist. I'm definitely not a politician. I'm just Alon's mother, and I'm very worried about the war and the military pressure on Hamas, because my son is in there and I want him to come home alive.
It's important to also point out that Edith actually is convinced she will see her son alive again. She's convinced that she will hug him again and see his smile again. Hamas released a propaganda video in which he featured Diane recently, and she said that she noticed his smile in that video. We're seeing more protests again today, particularly in Jerusalem, outside Prime Minister Netanyahu's residency. Some of the families of the hostages calling for a deal to end the war. They are against this new offensive in Gaza City. Diane.
Tom Suki-Burridge, thank you. And the Federal Reserve is making a high-stakes announcement today on interest rates. The central bank is expected to cut interest rates today as they try to navigate a bout of slow hiring and rising inflation amid rising political pressure. President Trump is attempting to fire one Fed governor as he just secured a seat on the board for one of his top economic advisors. ABC's Elizabeth Schultz is here to break it all down for us. Elizabeth, what are you watching for at this meeting today?
Well, Diane, we are here at the Federal Reserve where that rate cut is expected to be announced just in a couple of hours here. As you say, we're looking for a quarter-point interest rate cut. So this would be the first time the Fed has lowered borrowing costs since December of last year. And this is a really important decision for the economy, for businesses and consumers. When you think about it from the consumer point of view, we are already seeing mortgage rates go down just in anticipation of this move from the Fed. Mortgage rates now at a 3-year low, hovering close to 6%. We know that a small difference in those percentage rates can mean hundreds of dollars of difference on your monthly payment. Another place this could affect your own wallet. Think about your credit card statement. If you're carrying a balance on your credit card bill, those interest rates right now are still near record highs, 20%. That amounts to a lot of interest if you're not paying off your balance every month. Those rates might come down as the Fed starts to cut rates. One of the key questions going forward here. installing his top economic advisor to the Fed board. Stephen Myron was just confirmed as a Fed governor within days of this meeting starting. At the same time, the president tried to fire, as we've talked about, Fed Governor Lisa Cook. For now, she is participating in this meeting. An appeals court basically said she can stay on the Fed for now. So one thing we're looking at closely today, Diane, is are there dissents in this Fed decision? In other words, are there governors at the Fed or other Fed members on the committee who say rates should be lower than they are now? That's something that, you know, could suggest they're listening to President Trump a little bit. Also looking at, you know, what does that mean for who could potentially succeed Fed Chair Powell, whom Trump has also said he would want to fire. Powell's term is up next year. Diane.
Elizabeth Schulze, thank you. And we are following breaking news on Capitol Hill. Former CDC Director Susan Menares is testifying before Congress about being fired just weeks after she was confirmed. She tells senators she got pushed out for refusing the health secretary's demands that she agreed to greenlight vaccine recommendations regardless of scientific evidence. Secretary Kennedy has denied that, saying he fired her because she says she wasn't trustworthy. Now Menares is refuting that and also warning she's worried the CDC's advisory committee could make different recommendations for vaccines and as a result restrict access for children and others in need without scientific review, or at least rigorous scientific review. Let's listen in.
And I put my senior advisors together.
When did you remove them and remove their access to your floor? And you had a conversation with the secretary about this. When did that happen? Like how many days into your job?
I'm sorry, I don't even know what you're asking.
Yeah, you do, because you already talked about political appointees that the secretary put in place. You removed the political appointees that was in there when you first got to your work. When did you remove them from your floor and take away their ability to access your floor? And you know exactly what I'm talking about because you and the secretary spoke about that.
You're miscontextualizing.
No, I'm not. I'm asking the question. What day did you remove them?
I have one political chief of staff. I have 3 political chiefs of staff. I had space. Paid for all of them in my suite.
When did you remove the political appointees before, or the political hires before you got there that was there prior to you getting there? And this isn't hard. It's not hard. You talk in circles and I just want an answer because you know.
So I had the security of my suite.
Okay, so let me ask you something. Your conversation with the secretary, you said that he said he didn't trust you.
Correct.
You testified to that. Is that really how that conversation went? Because there's other people in the room, and I think the conversation was, can he trust you? And your answer was?
He said he could not trust me.
No. The answer, ma'am, it was a recorded meeting. So you can testify one way, or you can prove that you're lying or be honest with this committee. And I'm giving you the opportunity to be honest here because you've been really walking around the edges and not being truthful. So did he ask you the question, can he trust you? And your answer was?
He told me he could not trust me. And I told him if he could not trust me, he could fire me.
That isn't how that conversation went. And you know that, don't you?
He told me he could not trust me. And I told him if he could not trust me, he could fire me.
Ma'am, all we're looking for is you to be honest. And you haven't. You're not being honest with the conversation you're having. You're not being honest with the timeline, and you won't even give the answers of who your attorneys were. And all we're looking for is you to be honest. If we're going to have a hearing and we're going to discuss certain things, let's make sure we're talking with someone that we can trust your answer. Just like my kids. I tell my kids all the time, you know, one thing I want from you, I can deal with any situation we walk into as long as I know you're being 100% honest with me. The minute I can't tell you're being honest with me, I can't trust you. From then on, everything you say is questioned. And you have to question you because your personality and your answers aren't correct. Therefore, I yield back.
Senator Markey.
Dr. Monterez, Dr. Howery, I want to thank you for being public health heroes. When you took your positions, you swore in oath to public health and safety, not to political ideology. And you kept that promise to the American people. When confronted with pressure to make decisions based on political science, you chose real science. You said clearly that vaccines work, that they're safe, and that our children and most vulnerable deserve the life-saving protections that vaccines have provided for generations. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may put the con in conscience, but you put the science in conscience, which is where it belongs, at the CDC. It is my hope that more officials within the CDC, within HHS, and throughout this administration look to what you, Dr. Monterez, and Dr. Howery have done, and that they feel inspired by what you have done and what you're doing here today. In the face of political pressure and threats and misinformation and conspiracy theories, you are standing up for science, standing up for facts, standing up for the protections which our children and families need. You're standing up for what is right, and I hope that your colleagues follow you. Before hepatitis B vaccine was approved in the 1980s, upwards of 300,000 Americans were infected each year, including nearly 20,000 children. Thanks to hepatitis B vaccine, annual cases are now down to roughly 22,000, a 93% reduction. And for children, there is now only a handful of cases each year, with a total of only 13 cases in babies in 2022, down from 20,000. That is a stunning public health success. We achieved that because every newborn gets the Hep B shot at birth. Why? Because 9 out of 10 infants infected at birth become chronically infected, and a quarter of them will die due to hepatitis B. Yet this week, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, a panel newly filled with Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s handpicked vaccine skeptics and individuals with no vaccine or public health expertise, is expected to vote on delaying that birth dose of hepatitis B vaccine until age 4. This would reverse decades of progress, put kids in harm's way, and make countless children the victims of Secretary Kennedy's anti-vaccine bargain. Dr. Howery, do you believe that a change to that recommendation on hepatitis B vaccine at the advisory committee meeting this week would be based on an objective, comprehensive review of data?
So if the vote is to change it to age 4, then that would not be based on data.
Do you agree with that, Dr. Monterez?
I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that that would be the appropriate thing to do.
So based on your interactions with Secretary Kennedy and his advisors, are Secretary Kennedy's beliefs and politics driving the change to vaccine recommendations, including hepatitis B vaccines, instead of science and children's health?
That is the concern.
Dr. Howard?
Yes, I believe it is. I received an email, suggesting that we look at hepatitis B shared decision making, and I think that's where I'm thankful to Senator Cassidy for really raising hepatitis B via social media. I hope that this hearing makes ACIP reconsider this recommendation.
Yeah. Would you want to reconsider the decision, Dr.?
I would want them to keep it at birth. I think there's a lot of moms that don't know they have hepatitis that can then transmit it to their baby. And even if the mom is hepatitis B negative, we don't know what the home situation is.
Dr. Monterez, were you or your team asked to provide any data regarding hepatitis B and the vaccine in preparation for the upcoming ACIP meeting?
So I am not aware of any requests to myself. I would defer to Dr. Howery as well, as she was directing our staff to provide data, because we're not looking for, just like we have in other meetings to where there are more groups, that CDC staff provide data to discussions.
Is that traditional practice where,
No, traditionally,
where experts are not being asked?
Well, traditionally there's work groups that develop it, but we had a case at the last meeting to where our experts developed evidence because there wasn't a work group, and we were asked by the Secretary's office to remove that document.
Yeah, Dr. Howard is the current Hep B vaccine recommendation on universal birth dose for infants based on a thorough and comprehensive review of decades of data and evidence.
It has been, and I think if we reconsider recommendations, we just need to look at the updated evidence and always weigh the risks and benefits, and that's what the committee should do.
Is that evidence that you have seen conclusive to change a decades-long recommendation?
So I haven't seen any of the updated evidence. They were working on that before I left.
Yeah, well, you know, the concern, of course, is that Robert F. Kennedy is going to make America sicker again. They're going to send us towards more disease, more death, and more despair in our nation. And again, I can't thank both of you. You're healthcare heroes, historic healthcare heroes for our nation. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Before we turn to Senator Hussein, you wanted to enter.
Just very briefly, I ask unanimous consent to enter the record 2 letters from Dr. Daniel Jerrigan and Dr. Dimitri Daskalauskas.
Without objection.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to get right into this. I share the concern of many of my colleagues about the failure of our public health establishment to have trust in it. And I think that has had lasting harm inflicted on America's children. And I know, Dr. Monterez, when we visited, I talked with you about this issue of trust in the CDC based on my experience as Lieutenant Governor during the pandemic. Because during that time, I know elected officials, parents, community leaders turned to the CDC for clear science-based guidance. And as Lieutenant Governor, who had to work with the governor every single day and managing through this pandemic as a father of special-aged children, I experienced firsthand the effects of that guidance. And we were hoping that it was going to be based on the science, or we kept saying it was based on the science. And yet we know that now that that guidance was based on politics and special interests. Instead of safeguarding children's health, CDC allowed activism to override science with devastating consequences. And I just want to give a few facts on how trust has been eroded. By the way, we talked about not having enough money. Well, CDC's now has 12 centers, but only 3 of them were authorized by Congress. And I think it's drifted from its original mission. And trust has been eroded due to these high-profile failures during the pandemic, failures that cost years of academic process and progress. The House Oversight Committee found that the CDC gave the American Federation for Teachers access to edit school, reopening guidance, inserting triggers and prolonged closures. And this was not science, it was politics at the expense of our youth. The consequences of these widespread closures were very measurable. The Wall Street Journal reported that math and science scores for 4th through 8th graders fell to their lowest level since testing began. The New York Times confirmed that students in districts with prolonged closures fell as much as half a grade behind in math, while those that reopened sooner lost less ground. New York Institute projects that this would cost more years in lifetime earnings for today's students of 5 to 6%, costing our nation an amazing $31 trillion in economic growth. The damage went beyond academics. The House Oversight Committee reported that suicide attempts by girls aged 12 to 17 rose by 52% during this period. Prolonged closures and confusing policies took a heavy toll on children's mental health and physical health. Even the CDC's universal masking guidance for children lacked evidence, went back and forth, and its own data showed no significant difference in the case rates between schools with or without masks. And equally troubling is the CDC's growing susceptibility to special interests through the CDC Foundation, which accepted private donations, including thousands of contributions routed through platforms like ActBlue, which, and with these weak safeguards, the agency left to police itself and further undermined public confidence during this whole process. And we talked a lot about that. And this lesson is clear to me that when an agency is entrusted with science and it bows to politics, children pay the price. And we must demand accountability. We must restore